we are under attack like we have never been before. And this is not just to scare everybody. It's just true. Things are getting easier. The frequency is ramping up.
Travis Taylor, what's up, man?
Robert, how we doing, man?
Doing well. Let's get this episode of Let's Make IT Simple rolling. We have another interesting topic. I can't say that every time, even though I believe it. But this is an interesting topic for sure. And it's not just for business owners or professional. This is for everybody. An important topic because we see this pop up all the time. And sometimes we wonder, why is this happening all the time, or should I keep doing this? Updates on our phone, updates on our computer, updates on our tablet. What's the deal with updates? Why should we keep our devices up to date? Travis, we'll go ahead and launch that question at you.
So that eventually you'll have to buy another one. That's that's why. And then they'll make a lot more money. No, so there really are important updates. A lot of times are very important, and it has a lot to do with security. That's the big one that we should be concerned about today. But there's a lot more than just security vulnerabilities and things like that are being fixed with updates. So I was thinking about this, and I just wrote down a couple of bullet points, but to go over essentially, when you get an update, it's going to have one of these following things, right? You're going to be either getting new features, you're going to be getting improved compatibility, maybe with other pieces of software, with the hardware that you're using. It might improve the stability of the software. So maybe there were some bugs inside of it that were causing crashes or freezes and things like that. Oftentimes they'll remove outdated features as well. So maybe there's a new way of doing things in that software. And, new feature they want you to use, and there's an old feature they want to stop using. They might deprecate that feature for a while, and say like it's not the preferred feature. And then eventually they'll just remove it entirely. So that button that used to be there, the way of doing things that used to be there, is finally removed because now you've had enough time to transition over to the new way. But the big thing is the security fixes, right? The vulnerability fixes and the security updates. That's the one that really makes the updating critical and important. And I would say that that's the major reason to stay on top of updates.
Full confession here. Before talking to Travis about this was like maybe a year or two ago. We had this conversation just kind of randomly. We're talking about updates, and I would always wait like a solid 6 months before I would update anything, because I've had experiences where I updated something and then nothing worked. And then they were like, oh, oops, we messed that up. Here's another update. And so I would always wait a long time. And I had this conversation with Travis, and he was like, oh, hey, well, you might want to update that, because if it's a security update, then you're sitting there vulnerable for 6 months, thinking you're outsmarting the system. So
right.
This is relevant. This is relevant because it was an actual conversation that we had in real life too. I don't know if you remember that or not, but
yeah, I do actually remember that. And so there's a couple of things I'll share with you and with the audience that is worth knowing about. You don't have to really remember or commit any of this, but you should know about it. There are these things called CVEs, which are common vulnerabilities and exposures. It's a term we use in the industry. CVEs get published. Basically what it's doing is it's taking a known issue of vulnerability and assigning it a unique number so that you can track it and figure out what is it? What's the fix for it? It's just a way to organize the problem. And CVEs do get published from all sorts of folks, developers of firmware and software throughout the whole world. And they score them on like a rating of 1 to 10. It might even be 0 to 10, but it's the point is that the closer you get to 10, the worse it is. And when you have a CVE of like a level 9, 8, 9, 10, this means that there's a massive issue you got to respond to right away. And now it depends, again, on your environment. Are you exposed to this issue? Do you actually have hardware that's affected? Is your hardware running the version of the software that's actually vulnerable, or are you on a different version? But there's a whole lot to be considered. But a lot of times you just don't know this if you're the end user. So the safe path forward for you is, if there's an update, run the update. It's true, though, sometimes these new updates will come out with compatibility issues. Maybe they're trying to solve compatibility problems or stability problems. in the process, maybe they've introduced a new one. Now they're supposed to do testing. There's a lot that they're supposed to be doing to make sure that doesn't happen. But these platforms are complicated. There's a lot of moving parts, and they can't have the exact scenario that you have and that I have and that, you at home who's watching this has. They can't have all of our exact environments. There's just too many variables. So they do the best they can in most cases. And then unfortunately, there are some developers who maybe just aren't doing as good of a job as they should be doing. And then there's that problem too. But generally speaking, my advice to you would be run the update. If you got an update, run the update. With regards to your work equipment, if you don't know if your stuff is up to date, make sure you have an IT person, right? An IT firm, maybe an MSP that can do that for you, and make sure that you're on top of those things, because you don't want to leave yourself exposed for 6 months. This year, because we're filming this right now in November of 2021, and this year alone, there have been massive issues that have come out. There have been supply chain attacks throughout the year. Lots of software, and I think we've talked about that a little bit already on the show. Lots of software that was exposed to massive issues. The patches and the updates that come out after those issues are what fix them. We are under attack like we have never been before. And this is not just to scare everybody. It's just true. Things are getting easier. The frequency is ramping up. Software updates are important. Don't ignore them. When they come out, apply them. And if you're not taking care of them in your business, partner with somebody who can help you. Because you don't want to be, it's easy enough to do in most cases. And you don't want to be missing the opportunity here to make your company safe, your users' data safe, when it's just as simple as hitting an update button.
So we talked about the why keep our devices up to date. So, security is one of the big reasons why. And then the other thing that we're talking about is what are some of the updates? What are some of the reasons that these companies make the updates? So I guess we could treat those as two separate questions. I know you were joking initially when you said to keep you buying things, but that happens too, I'm sure. If we're looking at, for example, apps, or software for your phone versus an app, what could be the differences in your updates for an app or your updates for your software for your phone or laptop or tablet, whatever it is?
Yeah, well, so it's software, right? At the end of the day, it's software that is being updated, but there is also another thing called firmware that gets updated. So what I would say is a couple of different things to look at. You've got your devices that you're used to thinking about, right? Like your phone. You probably get updates on that all the time. I have an update right now from Apple that's pending. That's supposed to happen, this evening. I might even kick it off after this, right? There's your computer, like your Windows computer, but there's also programs on those things that need to be updated as well. But what I like to also say is that in addition to the things you're thinking about, if you're a business, you've got servers, you've got routers, you've got switches and firewalls and wireless access points. You've got a lot of printers need updates. Not that often, okay? But sometimes there's known vulnerabilities in their firmware that need to be updated and patched. And these are things that we should be keeping up to date and thinking about. So it's not just the things that maybe you're used to thinking about, like your phone and your computer that you see in front of you. But really, if you've got a business or you've got a lot of other equipment, you've got to consider those things as well. And when's the last time you looked to see if your wireless access point needs an update? Have you ever checked?
Is this a personal question?
No, that was a rhetorical. Well, actually, okay. Do you have a wireless access point? You should check it. Yeah.
I was like, you're going to put me on blast here. Yeah, never is the answer to that personally.
Right.
Another thing that when we're talking about updates that I had noted is, and you've mentioned a couple times in your conversation here, is that there's the software side or firmware, and then there's also the hardware side. Because your hardware can only take you so far. If you have a computer from 1972, it's not going to matter how much you update that. There's going to be vulnerabilities there. So how can someone thinking about the business side of things, what should business owners do to make sure that their hardware is up to date as well, because they might not get the little alert that says your hardware is out of date. So what are maybe some rules of thumb or some things that business owners can think about with that?
Right. Well, no, listen, it is a good question you're asking, because it's basically like life cycle management. What is your life cycle, the life cycle of your equipment? When you buy it, how are you handling that on the financial side of your business, and how are you depreciating that asset over time? Like, there's a business piece to it, and then there's just staying ahead of the issue of aging hardware breaking and causing a work stoppage in your environment. We recommend for workstations that you, at the 5-year mark, start looking at replacing those machines. Some people do 3 years. They're much more aggressive. But we found that with modern hardware, 5 years is a pretty safe bet. You can get there. You can get a warranty up to 5 years. But past that point, really, you need to start cycling that equipment out of your environment, new equipment in. But, something else is important to point out here is that there are hardware incompatibilities that arise over time. There are pieces of software that require certain types of hardware to run. Windows 11 is a great example of this, right? There's a requirement of a TPM 2.0 chip for the Windows 11 operating system. Although they've been kind of changing the compatibility there and kind of pulling back on that a little bit, there still, it looks like, there definitely is an issue with some older pieces of hardware not having TPM at all. Windows 11, is not going to be compatible with that platform. So at some point, you may be missing a critical feature at the hardware level that prevents you from going to the next version of the software. So you're right. It's not just about updating the software. It's also about having a good lifecycle management system to make sure that you are proactively managing your environment with a plan. And we could do we should do a whole episode about lifecycle management, because a lot of people just have this mentality of, well, I'm just going to buy this thing. I'm going to wait until it breaks and then I'll replace it. Right now, if you are waiting for your laptop to break before you replace it, and you have any specific needs at all on your laptop, good luck getting a replacement. The chip shortage that we're going through right now is pushing, Dell machines, Hewlett-Packard machines, Lenovo machines. It's pushing these commercial grade machines out weeks. So you might have to run down to Best Buy and find something, and it's not the right thing, and you spent too much, or it's just, you got some goofball home style machine that's not going to have the warranty or the capabilities that you want. And why? Because you didn't plan. You didn't have a management plan in place. But yes, you need to do software updates. You also should have a plan together for your hardware. And we should actually we should go into that in more detail, I think, pretty soon.
Yeah. As soon as you said that, I was like, that's another episode for sure. So we'll note that, and anyone who's watching who's interested in that lifecycle management for your devices, be looking for that in the future. But to wrap things up on this episode, we talked about updating your devices. We talked about software, hardware. We talked about what type of updates they are and why you might want to make those updates. So this is going to be a tough one to wrap up. But
I'll try.
That's the name of the podcast. Let's make IT simple. So Travis, we got a challenge for you on this one. 30 seconds or less. Let's make IT simple. Why keep your devices up to date?
Great question. I don't think I've ever made the 30-second mark, but let's see if I can do it this time. Here we go. Because it'll give you new features, improve capabilities, improve compatibility. It might improve the stability of your software and remove outdated features. But most importantly, those updates are how you fix vulnerabilities, and that's how you keep your business safe and your customers' data safe, and your data safe.
Excellent. I feel like you had some seconds to spare there.
I might have made it.